Hello, this is Dr. Helen Webberley. Welcome to our GenderGP podcast, where we will be discussing some of the issues affecting the trans and non-binary community in the world today, together with my co-host, Marianne Oakes, a trans woman herself, and our head of therapies. So, Neville Southall, very excited to have you on. Tell us who you are, what you do, and whatever are you doing on the GenderGP podcast?
What I was a footballer for Everton and Wales for a long time, probably 20 odd years. What I do now, I work in a special school in Ebervale, which is, I know, it's not too far from you. And why I want to come on here really is because I don't know nothing really. So I'm on here to learn a bit as well. And I think every time I go on something or I talk to people, then I learn a bit more. And it's no good me going on Twitter and talking about transgender issues or anything like that. I don't think that's right. I think what you can do is support and help when you can. But the main thing is to get the right people to talk about the right things so you can educate people, because it's like anything else. Any minority group needs to be understood and it needs to have a fair platform to be able to do that. And the way the media's set up, well, in most countries, it doesn't give everybody a fair view. So my platform is really to raise awareness of what people do and to give them a chance to actually say what they believe in. And I think everybody should have that chance.
A couple of weeks ago, you very kindly gave Marianne, our head of therapies, sole access to your Twitter account, which obviously has a massive following, for your followers to ask all the questions. So what's your interest in minority groups? Why have you decided to do this, to help people learn? What's your interest? Why you?
Well, mainly because I can. And I thought our society was supposed to be, we were brought up to help everybody. So, look, when I first sort of went on Twitter, and it was all because a lad was, really homophobic, but he was obviously denying he was gay. So we had long chats, and then eventually I came on Twitter and asked people what I should be saying, because coming from the football world, it was never talked about in nice, friendly terms to be gay. It was completely the opposite. So I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say to him. So I was looking for advice, really. And then from there, it just sort of moved into the transgender. I met a few trans people, and I listened to their stories, and I thought they were horrendous. And I don't understand why anybody in this country should go through what they have to go through to be themselves. And I think surely we bring up our kids to believe that they can be themselves, because otherwise, how can they reach their potential? And I think that's what we all strive for, isn't it? Everybody tells us we've got to reach our potential, but then we have tons of laws, tons of stupid people, tons of stupid government people who say, but you can't do that. You've got to live within our rules. But if their rules are so constrictive that people can't be themselves within reason, then that's wrong. We should be bringing our people up and caring enough about our people to reach for full potential, surely. And if you can't be who you are, you're never going to be as successful as you should be.
It doesn't seem that complicated, that anybody in society could aspire to them values and that concept that to be the best we can be, we need the environment to allow us to be the best we can be. And why would we constrain it by our narrow thinking? So, yeah, I just agree with everything you said there.
I think there is reasons. I think, and I know it might sound controversial, but I do think one of the reasons is religion. I do think it's a generational thing as well, is because, when you look back through time, excuse me, the amount of talking people did was very small. They never showed their feelings. It wasn't a done thing to show your feelings. So, transgender people have been around for millions of years. So it's not a new thing, but everything in the old days was shut in the cupboard. If you look at places like Bedlam and places like that, they shot people away with mental health issues, with disabilities. They shot them away because one, they didn't want to deal with their feelings, and two, they didn't want to deal with their problems. So they were shot away. And now I think we have a version of that with transgender people and some of the other minorities, because people want to shut them away, and they want to, you can't go in there. You can't do this, you can't do that. Well, we should have a society where we say, right, okay, who are you? Okay, you're this. Okay, fine. Go and do what you got to do. Why should things be a barrier? And things should be celebrated. So if you want to be yourself, surely that's the best thing in the world to happen to you. So why should we go against that? To me, it's completely nutter bonkers.
Marianne, I know you're going to have stuff to say about this, because we talk about this so often, don't we, that people who are trans or in any minority group sometimes feel that they have to hide, and that they can't express themselves, they can't be themselves, they can't show the world who they really are. And that's what Neville's saying, isn't it? And I'm sure you come across that a lot.
Just to kind of, that metaphorical closet, isn't it? Keep us in the closet. The truth of the matter is, I think what we're going through today is the door's open whether we like it or not. And there are a small vocal minority of people, unfortunately, with big platforms trying to shut the door again. And all it's doing is creating a hostile environment. And I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, Neville, you've got probably a bigger platform than some people, and you've been offering that platform to give the people stuck in this closet a voice to try and get through that small minority. And I just wish there was a few more people that could see that, because there's nothing to be frightened of. I think that's the bottom line.
But don't you think it goes back to the same old things? Unless you understand something, lots of people are frightened of it. At one time, people were frightened of fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's lots of things that people are frightened of, but I do think, and I have this with football a lot, that people don't care. We make a big thing out of people really not, they don't understand. Because I never understood. But I do think it's because people don't sit down and explain stuff, or they don't have the platform to explain stuff. So it's not that people are anti-trans, because some of my followers are usually pretty good, to be fair, so we don't have many problems at all. So I think the majority of people just want to get up in the morning and live their life. If you live next door to them, they're not really bothered. As long as you don't bother them, they don't bother you. And in an ideal world, you all become friends and look after each other. The problem you've got is, and it's reflected in the idiot who's just come out of the White House and our Prime Minister, people like Tommy Robinson, who divide the country. Now, when you have a person in charge of your country who set out to divide it to get his party in, and other people who divided it, whether through race or gender, that's not a society that anybody really wants to be part of. So we need to go back to a different way of doing stuff, and that is to be inclusive. And that means to listen to people and to care for everybody, not just the people who you think should be cared for, or the people that you like, or the people who your mates down the road who can give a big contract to. A society that works is one that works for everybody and not just for a few. And I think we are seeing a shift in the world, and I think trans people will win out in the end. There's going to be some major obstacles, because sport is one of them, and that's one of the other reasons why I'm interested, because I don't see anybody doing anything about the sport, really, apart from trying to shut the door on it, hope it goes away, and then deal with it in 10 years' time or whenever. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure put on people to actually sort out the way forward for trans people, because you've got to have some outstanding athletes, and they have to, at some time, put them into a category. And all I hear is, but she shouldn't go in that because that's not fair. He shouldn't go in that because that's not fair. Whatever transgender person goes into any race or tournament or whatever, they're abiding by the rules. So they're doing what's perfectly right and natural for them. But there seems to be some other people on the sidelines who particularly don't want that to happen. Now, these are usually ex-athletes or, dare I say it, middle-aged people who don't have a clue about life, who've just had their nice quiet life, going to a nice restaurant every Saturday night and having a nice life, and then going, oh, hang on a minute, what's that? Well, we don't want any of that. Well, no, we can't have any of that stuff. So I think there's going to be, the more and more transgender people, the more opportunities there'll be, the more battles you'll have to have. But in the end, everything will win through, because that's what's going to happen. Because football clubs, for instance, are going to have a problem. Because if they have a lad who's come through and he suddenly he wants to be himself and take him off to the girls' team, you've got to think about insurance. You've got to think about the capabilities. They have to make decisions. And at the moment, most sports and most people in life are quite content not to make a decision. They're quite happy to allow things to just ride along until they have to do something. And then you have the transgender people, and I might be talking for you now, who want to live their own lives, want to have the same opportunities as everybody else, who want to be treated the same as everybody else. And then we have a third group who think that's, for some reason, ridiculous that somebody shouldn't live their lives themselves. So you've got a group of people who are living their lives, and to be fair, most of them I've spoken to are quite bitter and twisted, and don't want them to succeed. Well, the society we should have is to be all-inclusive and not be bitter and twisted. I know which one I side with.
Interesting. I've said to Helen many a time, if it hadn't have been for sport, it wouldn't have been worth me going to school, because I was no good at anything else. And, obviously there was not the discussion about inclusive sport, back in the day. But we default to elite sport, Neville, when we talk about sport. So when we start talking about we shouldn't have, trans women competing against women, it's not fair, And I would not deny that it's going to be a problem, that we need to have regulation to make sure we keep it a level playing field to some degree. But the actual impact of that is that you get an 8-year-old trans girl kicking a ball around with the girls' team that nobody has a problem with, suddenly being demonised, and the parents being influenced by what's being said at the top. And to me, the sporting authorities really need to get a grip of grassroots, and the rest will filter through. And if somebody, a young child, grew to be an elite athlete, then it's not just in their interests that the sport accepts them, it's in the public's interest, because if they're the best person at that sport, then society's going to miss out on that. So sport, to me, has got to just be inclusive, because we're going to miss out, potentially on some of the best athletes.
But we're talking about having sensible conversations, aren't we? Good discussions. And if you look at, say, Prime Minister's question times now, and Keir Starmer will say something to Johnson, and Johnson say, yeah, but you didn't do that. That's an argument that goes on the playground. That's not what we want from politicians. That's not what we want from our leaders of sport. Our leaders of sport should sit around the table with everybody and say, right, egos aside, agendas aside, which is the best way forward? And unfortunately, we seem to struggle in all walks of life to be able to do that. We don't seem to have a grown-up discussion about anything, and race is the same thing. We don't have grown-up discussions around race, around immigration, around anything. So what we tend to end up with is factions that fight each other, and nothing ever changes. The thing that will change for transgender people, the more and more there are, the more and more pressure they'll put on people, and the more and more they'll have to talk. So I can't see it in the future as being a sensible conversation. I can see it as being the weight of bodies, if you like, the weight of people coming through will force different things. Just like, and I'm really disappointed in football in lots of ways, because all the ladies' teams, we accept that they're gay. We accept that lots of them, have girlfriends and are married. Nobody bats an eyelid with that. So why is it more acceptable for the women's team and not the men's team? And until we have a gay man come out in football, which will happen, because there's no two ways about it, either the tabloid press or we create an environment where he feels comfortable to come out in, that will happen. And once the first gay man comes out, there'll be a lot more. And then eventually, following that, the transgender people hopefully will have the same confidence to voice their gender as the gay man. And then that will push it through. So not only should the FA be looking at how we handle the first gay person to come out in football, but also the transgender people. Because there's loads playing football, tons and tons of them, but they get too much abuse. And I think, to me, it starts at the top, and it starts with your leader of your country. He's got to build a society for everybody, and we have an idiot in charge who is clearly homophobic and racist and sexist. So we don't have much of a leadership role at the moment. So you'd like to think that somebody would come in and do what he's supposed to do for the country, which is bring the country together and make things happen. And I think I hate hearing stories about transgender, the way they treated. And that's one of the reasons why I always stick up for them. Because I never knew the kind of lives and the kind of things they went through to get where they needed to get through. And I'm thinking, well, it's not a 10-minute decision, is it? It's a problem. It's a long time agonising over what you think, what you feel, your environment, the things you actually practically have to do. And I see that a lot. The practicalities of becoming a trans lady is immense. And then people go, yeah, but he chose to do that. It wasn't a 2-second, oh yeah, I got up this morning, I think I'll be a trans woman today, was it? It's a long process. And I think that's where the education should come from. And that's what I found the most interesting was I never knew what it took to be a trans person. I thought, okay, you'd always sort of knew inside, and then one day something happened and you went, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this. But the practicalities of it are just immense. And I think that's where the education should be, about the practicalities. If I was going to do it, where would I find size 12 shoes? So there's all the practicalities that you never think about until you actually sit down and think about it. And I find that side of it as interesting as anything else, because it's really, when you sit down and think about what it takes, I think it takes immense courage, an immense determination, and immense self-belief. And yet, all people do is knock you for having them qualities, and I think that's wrong.
You speak with such clarity. I'm sitting here humbled actually for listening to you, because what you say is so true in your own language, in your own style of speaking, and it's just beautiful what you're saying. And what I'm hearing actually, it goes back down to education, doesn't it? And I'm thinking, as I've been listening to your talks, it's about educating the leaders, isn't it? So educating the politicians, educating the head of the Football Association, educating the head of schools, so that they can then take forward their rules and their policies that you were talking about, which we need to sharpen up and pave the way for people. And then what we've got to do, and also the education is not only to the leaders and to the heads of the teams, if you know what I mean, but also to the people themselves. Where do they buy size 12 shoes from? Because they don't know. It's not obvious, because you don't see the adverts on the telly for size 12 shoes. No. So it's all about that education, isn't it? And I'm thinking about the lad who's playing in the football team at the moment, who's listening to you in awe and with great respect, who is actually gay or who is actually trans, and they're going, that's me he's talking about, inside their head, So what advice would you give to that lad who's Sunday's coming, he's going to be kicking his football? What advice would you give to that lad that's listening in now?
be true to yourself, because you can't live your life any other way. And be realistic enough to know that there'll be bumps in the road, but there's bumps in the road whether you're straight, gay, or trans, whatever, isn't there? There's bumps in the road. So if you're going to live your life, live it the way you want to live it, or else you're never going to be happy. So even if it upsets people around you, or even if it means upsetting the team, or even if it means making big changes in your life, at the end of the day, you've got to come in your house and look in the mirror, because you have to live with yourself more than anybody else. And if you're happy with yourself, I think you'll have a good life. If you're not happy with yourself, you'll always be there thinking, maybe you should do this, maybe you shouldn't do that. For me, it's about making a decision on what you want and how you want to go about your life, because only you know inside your head how you think. And I think that's the most important thing, is for me to be myself. Look, and if I'm perfectly honest, I don't really give a shit whether anybody likes me or not. That ain't my problem, is it? It's not my problem. I can't control anybody else. The only thing I can ever control is me. I can't control people's reactions to me. I can't control what everybody else does. So I focus on what I do and what I believe in. And I listen to everybody. And I take what I can take in, and the bits I can't use, I throw away. But in life, you've got to... But if somebody criticises you, there's no point in biting straight back. You think about their criticism, because sometimes they do have a point. So you have to listen to them, and then if you still think it's rubbish in the day, you throw it away. But if you think there's a slight grain of truth in it, well, you take that, or you take that advice and take it in. But it's a hard decision to make on your own when you're younger. So the thing is, I think, is that there's lots of good helplines out there now for LGBT people. There's lots of good organisations. So I would say it's difficult, because it depends on how your mum and dad are. If your mum and dad are open-minded and sound and happy for you to be whatever you want to be, then you can go and talk to your parents. Maybe there's somebody in the family you can talk to, or you go on and you talk to one of the advice places. But most of all, just be yourself, because that's the best person to be.
Good advice, Marianne.
Definitely. I don't know why, I just feel compelled to ask you this question. Helen said about that young boy on the football pitch, and I was that young child, dare I say, at one time. And like I said, I only had sport. I was not academic, and it was the thing that allowed me to hide, actually. But the question that came into my head, Neville, was, could you have honestly gone onto the football pitch with any kind of distraction in your mind and been the best you could have been? So let's just say there was a young child who was gay or trans trying to play football. We talk about how dysphoria in particular stops them concentrating, that we don't do very well at school in many cases. We either do exceptionally well because we threw ourselves into it, or we just struggle to take in the information because we've got this nagging thing going on in our head, and we couldn't listen, and this internal monologue. So, as a goalkeeper for Everton, you couldn't have gone onto that pitch with that nagging thought, what would my teammates think if they knew how I really felt? You would never have aspired to that level. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, but we learn strategies around it, and I think that's the other thing we don't give kids. Decent strategies, because if I'm going to play, whether I'm straight, gay, whatever I am, I still got problems, haven't I? I still might get caught up in traffic. I still might have had a row with my missus in the morning. So for me, it was making a point, and it took me a while to say, right, okay, when I get up tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, nothing's going to bother me. So whether I have a row, whether I get stuck in traffic, that is only going to make sure that I play well, because I'm going to defy all of them things, and I'm going to play well in spite of that. So in the end, I'd be looking for one magpie. I'd be looking if there's any traffic. So well, just bring it on. Whatever trouble you want to bring on, because once I get to the game, my head switches. So I think for me, I found it easy to go work, home, training, and I just put them in boxes, if you like, in my head. And I think when you go to school as a child, then you just, if you can break it down, go, right, science, done, play, fine, science, done. And you learn strategies to cope. We need to have a look at everything, but mainly, if we're going to have kids who are going to be able to cope in life, well, then we need to give them the strategies to be able to cope in life. And I think part of that is when you go into mental health issues, people are unbelievably quick to stick a label on you, but they're twice as slow to give you solutions and practical things to help you. And I think somewhere along the line, we've got to go more in the solution-based stuff rather than sticking labels on people. And I think we need to look at everything and do things a slightly different way, more pro-people, if you like, and give them strategies and ideas of how to cope.
And I think, Neville, you're right. It is, Marianne's talking about that horrible noise of gender dysphoria, which we've heard from young people is terribly, terribly distracting and noisy and painful and really hard to concentrate on anything when that amount of noise is going on. But you're right. I'm imagining as you're talking of a situation where you're in a classroom with a teacher who is there to protect you. So somebody who understands you, understands who you are and why you've got that horrible noise going on. And then who then makes that classroom a safe place for you to implement and learn some coping strategies with that noise. And I think it goes back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier about, the leaders, the teachers, the politicians, the ones who are making the rules, the ones that are supposed to keep us safe. And, you mentioned mum and dad as well. Young people who've got mum and dad who understand are in such a much better place than and so we need teachers who understand, we need mums and dads who understand, we need politicians who understand, and then that might allow that young person to have those coping strategies that you're talking about, which are so important if they're going to manage their day or get through their day.
If we're going to manage life, we all need coping strategies. So coping strategies, I think, are the be all and end all of everything. Because the way I do it is, look, I tried loads of things in football, right, to get to where I got a successful strategy. They don't always work for everybody, so you need to find things that help you individually. And the reason why I think it's so important in schools is because a class might have 30 kids, and it's very hard for the teacher to make a real relationship with them 30 kids, because the next class he's got another 30 kids, then another 30 kids, and he might have the same 30 kids back. So it's really difficult. So I think part of it is that we look at education as academic and purely academic, and we just leave the person behind. And slowly but surely we are getting to a point where we're looking at the people's mental health, look at the pupils' well-being. So, and I wonder whether that's a generational thing, whether some of the old guard are moving on, and there's a new breed of people who are coming in. Because the universities and places like that are full of people with great ideas, and yet we still tend to go, but we've always done it that way. Yeah, but it's never bloody worked. So let's try something different. And I think it is coming. And I think things do change, but for everybody there should be an individual learning. Well, there is an individual learning plan. In our school we try and take each individual and work out what they want to be, where they want to go, what they see their future as. And I think if you've got 30 kids in a class, it's very hard to do that. So I think it's great to shove 1,200 kids in one place and expect them all to cope. But they don't. So for the big schools, it's a superstructure, but you lose a lot of kids in it. Now, when you have a little local primary school like we've got down the road, then I think you can build that family atmosphere, and you know what's wrong straight away. I think we'll go back eventually to maybe having smaller local schools, and they'll become more successful because they'll know the kids. Then all you've got to do then is make sure the teachers are motivated. So that means you have to pay them in good conditions. And again, we go back to the same thing. The care system the same. And, really, I don't think I've ever heard a politician talk about transgender issues in Parliament. I've never heard one talk about sex workers, and yet most of them probably know them all. So I think we're in a pandemic, and we're talking about furloughs, and yet every one of them sex workers is going to be as close to the clients as anybody else is ever going to be. And yet we've just completely ignored them, and there must be hundreds of thousands of sex workers who are relying on that relationships for their income. And all of a sudden you're telling people to stay home. Well, they have no choice but to go out. So why didn't we look after them? Why didn't we say, okay, well, look, we'll give you this? Because that obviously going to cut down the risk of a pandemic and the virus spreading. It's just common sense. But because it's something that doesn't win votes and is seen to be seedy or whatever in their eyes, they won't touch it. And I think that's why we need to have grown-up politicians who talk about everything. And we wouldn't be having these discussions still if we had some real proper politicians who believe in their community. I think we've seen so many career politicians who see it as a job and not to help the community. And I think that's a real problem. We just need real people in Parliament.
I do just have to qualify that I have heard MPs talk about trans issues in Parliament. Yeah. Unfortunately, they were talking about Helen, one of your local MPs, in a negative way, because that's all they will see. This is a negative problem. I've yet to hear a positive.
But we do point scoring politics.
Yes.
We don't do sensible grown-up discussions. If one says black, the other says white. The only reason is because they go against each other.
Well, one of the things I was going to say, you said something earlier, and I've spoken to you quite a bit about this, Helen, at times, that when I'm online, or if I'm having discussions outside of the real world, you'd think that when I step out onto the street, everybody's going to be touching me with a 10-foot barge pole. You know what I mean? That I would be some kind of pariah or monster, that I'd got two heads. But actually, when I do go out and I meet people and I go into, organisations for whatever reason, even if it's just going into a store, people really don't care.
There's no shockable value anymore. There has to be something ridiculous for kids to get worked up about. They've seen everything. We've gone from a generation of seeing nothing and keeping everything under wraps to so much exposure that the shockable value is not there anymore. So when you're walking as a transgender lady, they go, and? Because they've seen millions on the internet. And I do think generally what you feel when you walk out the door sometimes is not actually what's really happening. When somebody looks at you, they're probably thinking, shit, have I left the gas on? Have I put a cat in? Have I got to go to there now? And they may be looking at you, but their mind's a million miles away. We've all done it. Oh, he can be a funny look, but they might be miles away. So I think sometimes we get caught up in us and they caught up in them. And between it just looks a funny situation. Yeah. So I think sometimes it's completely different. And, to look at life from somebody else's perspective is a really good thing, I think. And we don't teach kids that enough as well. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes before you start knocking what they've done. Oh, I've been caught out a few times doing that. I think, he's a div. And you go, yeah, but he's done this, and okay then. So, Ronaldo, I hated Ronaldo. Why? Because I didn't think he worked. He wasn't my kind of thing. But then when I started reading what he was doing about his charity stuff and all that, I'm thinking, all right, and maybe I was wrong. So everybody learns, don't they? So it's just, you don't want to get on with everybody, but in the main, people don't care. People do not care what's going on. The people who troll you or go on the internet and make stupid comments are basically sad, lonely, cowardly people who don't have a proper life. Because if they believed as much in themselves as transgender people believe in themselves, they would be a million miles off that laptop or computer. They'd be doing their own thing.
going back to the coping strategies a bit, my nephew is an engineer, so he's graduated from university. He's an engineer, and now he's on the construction sites, but he's in the office rather than on the site. But when he's with the lads and they're all talking, and I don't know, because I don't know football, never actually watched a match all the way through. I imagine it's the same, that, that lad's attitude of, the jokes, the LGBT jokes, the gay jokes, the trans jokes, that lads all beefing around. And my nephew hears them and he doesn't like it. It's uncomfortable, but it's quite a brave thing to go into that melee when they're all talking about it, they're all having a laugh, to go in there and go, lads, not appropriate. So when we talk about, coping strategies, when things have always happened that way, which is what you say, it's that case, isn't it, where it's quite safe to chuck a few, bad jokes about. So what about people who are in that group who don't want to joke that way? They don't want to join in, but the rest of the lads are. So perhaps we ought to. Otherwise, you're going to look a bit of a dick if you don't, kind of thing. What are the coping strategies there, do you think?
Well, I think there's one. I think if I was going and walked into a room where they were all taking the piss out of gay people, then I would say, I'm here. This is what I am. So if you're going to go and do it somewhere else and don't do it in front of mine. But I do think the company should also have rules and guidelines where that's inappropriate. Look, lads banter, and there's nothing worse than men's banter, by the way.
Okay.
Is there?
I stand corrected.
Well, lads banter, yes, there's all that, but I think it also comes down to understanding, and that is, if they know somebody is offended by that, excuse me, then they don't do it out of respect for the person. So there's a difference between people act in a group and there's a how people act individually, and I've seen that quite a lot. Whereas people go, yeah, I don't like this, don't like that, and the next minute you see somebody with the same person going, well, you were there before, yeah, but he's all right. So it all depends who you know. When I see somebody goes, oh, one of the kids' school go, oh, I don't like black people, go, what about him? Yeah, but he's one of us, isn't he? So they all have their own, I suppose they all have their own values of who people are. And that's why we need education, really. I think it's really difficult at times to put your values on somebody else if they haven't got them values. I think it is difficult. But I don't know the actual coping strategy apart from, look, I don't want it in my presence. And if it carries on, then I'll take it further. But then he's balancing that up with, he's going to go and tell a boss. So he doesn't want to ostracize himself from the group. He wants to be part of the group, but he wants the group to respect him. And that's where the discussion needs to have. But because we don't have discussions like that, that's the problem, is that nobody has discussions.
No, and what it goes back to is what we've actually been saying all the whole of this last half hour or so. It goes back to leadership and to trust our leaders or to look after us and to set the rules and the boundaries by which we are acting. And in order for them to do that, we need the education. Because with education, we'll remove that fear that we're talking about, of the fear of the unknown, and allow those leaders to set the rules and the boundaries, which will provide protection for the people, the community that is within that leadership team, and allow them to live their own lives. So all the things that we've been discussing, it boils down to the same kind of concept, doesn't it, Marianne, which we've talked about so often, isn't it?
I think Neville hit on the crux of it here as well. I think business, any employer has to look after all its employees, not a selected few. That, if you've employed somebody to do a job, they should be able to come in and do it safely. So if somebody walked into a room and some homophobic banter was going on, there's got to be boundaries. We've got to be careful we don't crush team building, but there's got to be boundaries. Yeah. There's got to be boundaries of acceptability, and I think it takes brave people to set them boundaries. But they've got to have the backup of the policies within the company. Or if we're in an establishment, even in a pub, there's got to be boundaries of acceptability. That at some point, if somebody said that's going too far, that the landlord would say, "Yeah, you're right, actually." Can we go off in a different direction?
We have to get people to create an environment where it's acceptable to talk about everything without an agenda. And I think that's the biggest issue for me is why should somebody walk out the door and somebody has a go? There's no reason for that. But I do think it comes down to the type of society that we've actually built. And the internet does play a part in it because it's so easy to hide behind a computer and have a go at people. And the way the press is set up, they go after people and they are very divisive. Then we have the government who are divisive. Then we have Tommy Robinson and Farage who are divisive. We've had Trump who's divisive. We've had lots of people who've been divisive. And I think what minority groups suffer from is people who use them for their own agenda, not necessarily what's good for the country and what's good for the people. It's all about their own agendas, and they have been used so much in the past 5 or 6 years. It's been unbelievable, I think. So we need to have a different kind of politics. But, you know, if I'm coming to see you and I want to take the piss out of you, we need to know where we stand, don't we? Because we're going to have a bit of laugh, and I need to know where that. So maybe we need to have a discussion about, you know, what you find offensive, what you don't find offensive. A normal discussion. Well, you know, so you take the piss out of me. I don't mind that. The problem is we never get to that point. It's because society never mentions what's acceptable. They'll say it's homophobic. They'll say it's racist. They'll say it's sexist. And then people go, okay. And I hear lots of people go, well, what can we say? And that, to me, is the real issue, is what can we say and what can we do? And that's everywhere. I don't mean that derogatory or anything like that. I mean, it's people that are more fearful because they're not sure what to say. And they're not sure what is racist, what is not, what is homophobic, what is not. And I think it does come back to education, but also it comes back to the practicalities of every day, if you know what I mean. You know, if I met you, I would probably, I'd be all right, I'd just take the piss out if you didn't like it. You tell me when you're back. Because that to me is my judgment of you. You'd be strong enough, but you don't want to ever upset anybody. So you want to have a chat and you want to respect their views. The problem in society is that because we've all got various tolerance levels, but nobody knows what's what, do they? So I think within the education, it's got to be down to whoever you deal with, treat with respect and dignity, get to know them, and then you find your own barriers naturally through your relationship. And I think that, to me, is a better way, instead of going, oh, he's gay, well, okay, well, that must mean this, this, and this. It's not. I don't see you as a trans woman. I just see you as a person. And then we'll have our relationship. It doesn't matter if you had 3 heads or 2 heads. To me, if we're going to have a relationship, we just talk, and then we have a relationship and we just chat normal stuff. And then within that, we build up a nice relationship and we know where we stand. I'm trying to get over that I'm making sense or not. I think it comes down to...
what I want to say all the way through there, Neville, is you may disagree with me here, and I'm happy for you to do that, and you can take the piss out of me if you do. But I think football's a really good example. I'll self-disclosure, massive Manchester United fans. All my son's sites, the things that's bonded us together. And we can go out, we can fall out with each other over football. Yep. We've got our favourites within our own team. You know, we can argue over performance. It doesn't damage anybody. It doesn't damage our relationship. And we walk away from it no worse or better off than we were before. In the heat of the battle, we're going to have our adversaries. There's going to be people we don't like, because it's how we psych ourselves. Off the pitch, when we meet them on a personal level, we don't treat them like we're on the pitch. No. And you can fall out, you can be angry, you can laugh, and then you can carry on and think no less or more of the person than when you start the conversation. Mm-hmm. And if we could do that more with other things, I just feel it would be a better society, shall we say.
I think so, but I'd say it comes down to individual relationships, doesn't it? That's what it boils down to, is knowing people. And I think because people don't know many transgender people, then there is sometimes a lack of education. And then you have your own, everybody's got their own philosophy, and organisations have their own philosophies. And I find religion one of them that I find hard to take, because the religion always go, oh, man shouldn't marry a man, this, that and the other. And I'm going, yeah, but if God was tolerant, it wouldn't matter who's who, as long as people are themselves and they love each other. It doesn't matter. And I think so religion's got a bit of a base on that for me. And then they go and do what they want anyway, the churches, don't they? So, but I do think I want people to be able to have a grown-up discussion.
That's really what I'm saying, is that I don't want people don't have to like me, Neville. No. People don't have to agree with my politics. They don't have to agree with my choices in life.
No.
But if I'm not affecting that, if I'm not impacting their life, why do they feel they've got to follow me around on Twitter?
Because it's horrible. They're sad people. That's what they are. They're sad cowards. I get loads.
Yes.
To me, at the moment now, I'm just thinking, you're wasting your time doing this, because it's not going to affect me. Because most of the banter they try and put on, and most of the abuse is pretty shit, to be fair. It's no imagination in it. It's just boring banter. It's boring abuse. If they came up with something that'd be funny or a bit different, that'd be all right. But the banter's just shit. So
yes,
if it was any good, it'd be great. But no, most of the time I just either block it or I just retweet it, and then all the Everton fans slaughter them. So,
that's a question that I would have for you, Neville, if you don't mind, is how do you find the Everton fans respond to you defending or being an ally of the LGBTQ community?
They don't mind. So I put on Twitter once, would you be happy if an Everton player came out as gay? And one of them actually tweeted back saying, I'd be happy if he came out as a footballer first, because we got him. So, no, like I say, I don't think 99% of people don't care.
No.
They don't. And what I find is that they all have the same viewpoint. Is that, so what? I do stuff for Rainbow Toffees, and I think they could be used more by the club. At the same time, I think people don't really bother. I think, if we were all purple, nobody'd have a problem.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed our programme today. Please go ahead and subscribe to future episodes if you haven't done so already. If you or anyone else have been affected by any of the things that we've talked about in our podcast today and you'd like to contact us, please visit our website Help Centre and contact us via there. We're very happy to accept ideas for future episodes and future guests, so let us know if there's anything specific you'd like us to cover. You can also visit our website gendergp.com for a multitude of information about transgender health and wellbeing issues. You can follow us on social media. ID is @GenderGP, and you can sign up to our monthly newsletter. Full details can be found in our show notes on our podcast page. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.